It's February 28th, last day of February. I'm on top of the ball. I'm ready to talk about books. February was one of those months where, oh, this bang is really going to be testing me today. February was one of those months where I just was stressed about reading. I don't know why I was so determined that I had to be this connoisseur of literature. I've got, some classic YA fantasy, right? Adult fantasy, a couple of rom-coms, and then a contemporary. The first book I read in February was 1,000 Heartbeats, which is by our main girl, Kiera. If you remember, back in the day, the Selection series, iconic, very young YA. I would say perfect for 8th through 10th grade, earlier than that. Honestly, middle school. It's like a fantasy, but nobody has powers. It's just a royal time. And so we know our girl Kiera can write us a royal story. I've had a little bit of a journey with her. The duology that came after the Selection, honestly, both of the duologies that came after the Selection, it really took me on a ride. And I didn't really enjoy the ride. I got off of the ride and I was like, what the actual heck did I just read? This book is long. Kiera, where did my little 250-page little cute YA romance go? No, I mean, it's still a cute YA romance. It's like she took a trilogy or a duology and she just put it into one book, and I'm glad that she did. So it's like enemies to lovers, star-crossed lovers.
Now I can sell the star-crossed lovers from District 12.
Royal story, as you might predict with Kiera. And if that's what you're looking for, this will deliver it. Will it do anything else? No, but it will deliver that. It's essentially about this princess named Annika, and she is she's betrothed to a crabby guy, and she's whatever, I'll do it for my kingdom. It's a dual perspective book, so that's one of the perspectives. And the other one is this guy named Lennox, who is kind of the captain of the guard, very high up in the military of this other kingdom. So they are planning on taking over Annika's kingdom and kind of usurping, putting a little coup on the table. So taking over that kingdom, kind of wiping out the royal family and taking their spot. Early on in the book, she's kidnapped by him. So Lennox kidnaps Annika, for the throne, ooh, we'll use the princess to get the throne back, whatever. That's kind of where we start things. And I'm gonna let you take it from there. That was 1,000 Heartbeats. I liked it a lot. Not as much as the Selection, but it was good. Yes, so then you're gonna be so sick of me talking about this book series, and I'll be quick about it. It's the Finlay Donnonvan series. I read the third one, as I kind of teased in my last wrap up. So again, it's about an author who is mistaken as a contract killer and kind of has to work her way out of a couple of little mysteries. And this one dives more into a romance. I will say she attends a police academy, a citizen's police academy kind of thing. A lot of times with book series like this, I feel like they get trapped in a corner a little bit because they're well, what do we do now? Do we just keep introducing new threats or keep harping on the same plot? And I thought sending them away to a 2-week police academy, but there's also crimes happening, provided a lot of interesting stakes. So that is Finlay Donnonvan Jumps the Gun. Next book, I feel sad. I feel sad about this book because I wanted to like it. I did. I really wanted to like it, and I thought it would be really quick and easy for me to get through, and it just did not deliver on that. An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I read Sorcery of Thorns by the same author last month, and my critique of it was that, well, I didn't really like where the plot went, but also it was kind of long. And this book is you guys, it's less than 300 pages. And so a fantasy that's less than 300 pages, I knew it was more romance heavy than the plot side of it, so I wasn't super worried. And I could not get through. I DNF'd at 50%.
How dare you?
I know sometimes going into like a romance, obviously you know that the characters are gonna be together. Like, I'm not surprised. And the whole like inner tension of a romance fantasy is like, are they gonna be together? And I'm like, well, yeah. And I just like wasn't in a headspace to enjoy the journey of that. I thought but the magic system was so cool. Like, you know, a lot of fairy books don't really have like a classic fairy, like in like lore of fairies. They're like very evil and they can't lie and they like can turn into all these different things and they're like distinctly different from humans. And a lot of fairy books that are written now are very like, it's essentially just like a really buff hot guy who can maybe turn into an animal, but also is essentially just a human, has like human morals and human ways of thought. The fairies in this book do not have human morals or human ways of thought, and I thought that was really interesting. I just like was not in the headspace, so I don't think it's a DNF forever. But if you want something with kind of a more interesting magic system and you're in the mood for just like a cozy fantasy, I'd say an Enchantment of Ravens. Although I did not finish it, so I don't know how good the ending is. It might fall off the trail that it was already off of. Anyway. Okay, after that, it was a month of Audible. So I listened to 4 books kind of in a row, kind of throughout the month. And 2 of them were Crescent City and House of Earth and Blood, which are like 30 hours long. They're by sarahjmaas, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about why I listened to it instead of picking up a copy. Is with long sarahjmaas books, I have such a tendency to skim. I really am a chronic skimmer. It's something I'm working on. Something about her writing like makes me skim it. And I really enjoy the audiobook narrator, Elizabeth Evans, because one thing about sarahjmaas is she likes to repeat phrases a lot. It's fine. I don't mind it. I think it has a good impact. I think she maybe said it 12 too many times, but I think, you know, given that, it was fine. But the audiobook narrator does a really, really good job of like putting the right emphasis on those words, so I don't mind it as much. She's just really good, and it made me pay attention to the story because I really did enjoy both of these books. The first one more so than the second. And I'm also extremely aggravated and stressed, and yep. So what is it about? What a great question. So I'm just gonna give you a little bit of Crescent City, and I looked at the blurb on the back of the book just to know what I can reveal, because there's something that happens really early on in the first book. I did not know it going in. And when I tell you, I was listening to this book, like getting ready for the day, and I just had to sit down for like 30 minutes. It was bad. So I'll say it takes place in this fantasy world that is 17 times more complicated than it needs to be. Literally think of any fairy tale character and it's gonna be there. Fae, like wolf shifter, animal shifters, vampires.
Say it out loud.
Dragons, mummy. I don't know if there's mummies, but probably like all of the creatures that you could possibly think of are there in this town. It's not a town, it's a planet. Actually, there's a lot of planets. We don't need to go into it. Anyway, it's way too complicated, but if you ignore that, everything's fine. Or if you just like accept it, like right at the beginning, there's a lot of things happening and you just have to be like, okay, big world building, and I understand why she's doing it, especially where the series is going. It follows our main girl, who is half fae, half human, which makes her kind of an outcast, but not really, just like sort of an outcast, if that makes sense. And she is best friends with her friend Danica, who is like a wolf police officer, but like not. It's like a gang, but they're like working with the police. It's a lot. There's a lot. Like partying and like doing a lot of substances and having the time of their life. They're like rebel children. They're not like other girls. They're like wearing leather jackets and like spitting on the ground. I don't know. Bryce wants to be like a museum artifact curator kind of thing, whatever. Anyway, very early on, there's a very large, horrific, graphic crime that happens. red wedding kind of situation. And what happens is Bryce becomes kind of entrenched in the investigation. There's just a lot of things that point to her. And so she ends up having to do an investigation with this angel. He's an angel, but he's got like dark wings, and he's also a slave. There's a lot of like social hierarchy. Like, remember when you were in like European history class and they were like the proletariat and the bourgeoisie and the middle people and the priests and the you know, like that kind of energy. It's very, very, very complicated. And I didn't hate the complicatedness of it, but it did get to be a lot. So I'm glad I listened to it over a long period of time. Anyway, so she's with this angel who also happens to be very attractive and has like muscles that are just like steel. There's this scene, and I can't even do it. Like I just can't. He's like doing push-ups on the roof, and he's done like 400 push-ups, and he's like, you know, it's just annoying because they don't hurt anymore. It's more like I'm bored. And I'm like, listen, we didn't need that, but okay. Anyway, and so they're investigating this crime, essentially. And you know, as SJM does, there's secrets and drama and betrayal and way too many characters and random magic that doesn't always make sense. That being said, I did enjoy it. That being said, it is so smutty, I am going to cry. So smutty. And something to know about me, I don't read smut. I just don't enjoy it. It makes me uncomfortable. It like makes me feel like I'm like intruding on a private moment. And because I'm listening to the audiobook, it often comes out of nowhere. Like, we'll just be having a conversation, and then all of a sudden, clothes are everywhere, body parts are everywhere, and I'm hearing all the descriptions. And so I'll do a lot of like, fast forward 30 seconds, whatever. The first book, it's not so bad. The second book, don't listen in public. I scandalized so many drive-thru workers because they just came out of nowhere. I was in shock. Anyway, there's also, I'm just gonna say a sentence and you're just gonna accept it. Sex teleporting. That's all I'm gonna say, and we're gonna move on, okay? Was it a literature masterpiece? Absolutely not. Did I enjoy it and end up sitting for like 7 hours staring at a wall listening to it? I did do that. The other duology I listened to was by Lynette Noni, who wrote the Prison Healer trilogy. I don't know if I'm going to talk about that, but I might because I love that trilogy. Anyway, it was called A Whisper and a Weapon were the two books. And it was like my little 2016 dystopian sci-fi heart was living its best life. So if you've read the Shatter Me series, and the premise sounds almost identical to Shatter Me, but I think I actually liked it more than Shatter Me. It is about this girl who is called Jane Doe. Nobody knows her name. She's a prisoner in this asylum sort of situation. She has a very like regimented routine of like, you do physical training from this hour to this hour, and you receive like your plate of gruel, and then you go off to a therapy session, and then you go to essentially be experimented on in the afternoon, and then you go back to your cell and you sleep for the amount of hours, and you're everywhere you're transported with handcuffs, and you're very serious and everyone's very scared of you kind of situation. She's not spoken since she's been there. And she's been there for 2 years. And I really knew nothing going into this audiobook, but what I liked about it was I really did like it. I started listening to this audiobook like in the morning on a Saturday, just like to clean for an hour, and I literally listened to it until like 8 p.m. It was really bad. And then I listened to the whole next book too. It was really bad. But the book was so good. I wish that it had gotten more hype when it was published. It was published in 2018, which is kind of right as dystopian was kind of going out of fashion. And so I think that's why it didn't do as well. And it was hard, like I could not order a copy in the US. I had like, it's only available in Australia because that's where the author is from. Side note, this book is so Australian. Oh my gosh, the audiobook narrator was Australian, and I just love it. Like when the character is like yelling, they're like, no, like literally. Hello, so it is the next day. Australia did not like my slandering of Australia, even though I was claiming how much I loved Australia. But anyway, the video stopped recording. And so here we are. I was talking about how wonderful Lynette Noni is. She is so tightly plotted. This duology, here's what I'll say about it. I want you to read it, but I don't know how you're gonna get your hands on the book if you're not in Australia. So work on that. It really just, if you are itching for that Divergent Hunger Games kind of energy, but it doesn't fall into that third book trap that a lot of trilogies in that era fell into, where like the whole third book just like dissolved into madness and was horrible.
It's true.
So it didn't have a third book, so it couldn't do that. And when I tell you Lynette Noni knows how to set a trap for your little heart and deliver on that trap and make you feel like everything that you ever knew is destroyed, but it's like in a good way. And it's like a great story with good writing. Everybody go pick yourself up a Lynette Noni. She's so good. Anyway, next up, I was feeling like, I should read a rom-com for some reason. Starting with Love on the Brain. Everything that Elle Hazelwood writes is like science related. They're like women in STEM, but there's also a hot, tall guy who's also good at STEM but respects you as a woman. That's essentially the summary for every Elle Hazelwood book. She wrote The Love Hypothesis, which I've been recommending. Like it's like I'm expecting a commission because I recommended that book so much and I love it, and I don't even have a copy of it because I keep like sending it out to people. Audrey, please return my book whenever you're finished reading it. Thank you. This book, Love on the Brain, is about a neuroengineer, and she has purple hair. She's not like the other girls. She's working on a bougie space helmet with NASA. So she's like been put in charge of this project to like go work with NASA and make this like, but the person who's the co-lead on the project just happens to be her professional / academic rival, who's also very attractive, and they had a miscommunication a bunch of years ago. You know where it goes. It really did give me everything I needed it to. It was not as good as The Love Hypothesis, but it did the job. One thing I really like about these books, and my friend was telling me this, who like works in STEM, or she's going to work in STEM. She is going to school for engineering, maybe. She was saying like she likes how the author writes, like how the characters think. I think in a lot of rom-coms, there's like a very clear voice, and like obviously that rom-com voice is in these, but she is very like thinks very smartly, like a woman in science, because she's like Elle Hazelwood has her PhD in neuroscience and writes rom-coms. Like, if that's not an icon, I don't know who is. It turned into a thriller for like a page, and I was like, good morning, and then good night, because it turned back into a rom-com, which was great. More on rom-coms that have just like enough of a thriller element for me to get excited about it is Loathe to Love You, which has 3 different academic / professional rivals to lovers of women in STEM. They all have like a close proximity trope. So one of them, they're trapped in an elevator together. The other one, they're like roommates that they didn't want to be, but they are. Now they have to be roommates together. And then the third one, she's like trapped in an ice cave, about to freeze to death in Norway. So it really is all over the board. But in all cases, it's like, oh, this is this guy who I knew professionally, who kind of like did me dirty in the professional world, but we maybe had a one-night stand before all that happened, but then he broke my trust, but they didn't really talk about it, so they didn't actually, not to spoil it, but the miscommunication trope is rampant through these novellas. So if you don't like that, don't pick it up. But it was like 3 like 100-page novellas to crank through. I actually did not read the first one, sue me, because it didn't have like enough of that like, ooh, stuck in an elevator together, there could be some peril, she's freezing to death, like put me in every time. They were not as good as the full-length books, but they really got me through some stories. I needed to like crank through a bunch just to like get my head back in, like it's kind of a palate cleanser. So yeah, Loathe to Love You by Elle Hazelwood. You need a STEM romance, I know a woman who will help you with that goal of achieving that. Anyway, the last book I read in February It is my first book that I've read by Jenkins Reid, who's very, very, very popular. You don't need me to tell you about her. You've definitely heard of books by her. But this is a book published in like 2016. It was a while ago. It's called Maybe in Another Life. And what intrigued me about it was the structure of it. So if you've seen the movie Sliding Doors, where it's like reality is splitting into two and like your life goes in two different directions just because of one choice that you made, kind of thing. But like it's not like a thriller where she's like deciding between the worlds. They both just kind of exist parallel to each other. And if you know me in real life, you will notice that this is a very similar structure to the book I'm currently querying. And that's actually why I picked it up. I picked up a few books of this structure to kind of get a little bit of like insight about how they're structuring it and how they're communicating the split reality, and also just to see where it goes. It is a very like light contemporary, so it's about this girl who like she's kind of a wandering soul. Like she doesn't live in a city for too long. She's like, oh, I'm a wanderer roamer. And she meets this guy at a party who she was like a high school sweetheart with, and they like had a miscommunication, whatever. And in one, like she decides to stay out with him one night, and she decides to like go home with her friend the other night. Things very quickly differentiate between the worlds, and there's like concurrent love stories happening, and it makes a lot of good commentary on like how much control do we really have over our lives. And the reason I'm saying it like that is because I wrote a book in this style, so like I have thought about these concepts and tried to explain these concepts my own, like for like years. So mine is very different. It is a thriller that implements that style, because really the majority of books that exist in this template are like contemporary romances or rom-coms, and I wanted to see how like a thriller could operate in that style, like, and so it was good to see how she kind of put things together. It's funny, the main love interest in this book has the same name as the main love interest in my book. I liked it. I didn't really know what to expect with her writing style. Honestly, I thought it was a little simple, which I always appreciate books that it's more about the plot than it is about the writing, which I think probably puts me not in the majority. I'm more about the plot than I am about the writing style. And this had a good combination of both. The writing wasn't bad, but it wasn't like, this is the most eloquent thing I've ever heard. My main critique of this book was they just hit the nail a little too hard at the end. Imagine like the perfect ending to a book, and it wraps everything up and it's nice and everything has been explained and everything makes sense, and there's like been a little commentary, and then there's one more chapter that does the same thing again. So it just went like a little too far to wrap things up. This was also my bathroom book for the month. So I always have a book in the bathroom at my workplace because I was realizing something about myself, and this is going to be a TMI. So if you don't want to know, just exit out the video. It's fine. You can leave. You don't have to listen. And it's not bad. But I think everybody goes on their phone when they're in the bathroom. We don't need to hide it. We all do it.
Oh, just pooping. You know how I be.
And I was realizing, instead of like going on Instagram, I would like read fan fiction on Wattpad. And I would read like the same ones, and they weren't even good. So I was like, what am I doing? And then I'm like, what if I actually just spent that time reading? Like, I wonder how fast I could get through a book. So it wasn't even adding time to the amount of time I spent on the bathroom. Don't worry, all of my coworkers who I know are watching, I still got my work done. And I was not even in the bathroom for any more time than I usually would be. I just replaced the fan fiction with an actual book. And so I read probably 50% of the book in the bathroom. And then the last day of February, I took it home and read the rest of it. So I'm hoping to continue that trend. I don't know, seems kind of fun. What books are you reading in the bathroom? Comment down below. I'm excited for next month. I've got some good books in the queue. Remember last month when I said I was going to read a bunch of thrillers and there wasn't even like a single thriller on this list? Well, I still have all those thrillers to read. So buckle up, stay warm. It's currently blizzarding horribly outside. So I hope it is warm where you are, even though I know it's not. So hopefully the next time I see you, it is nice outside.